What if the groceries you depend on every single day just disappeared? Not all at once, not in some dramatic headline-grabbing collapse, just quietly, slowly, one item at a time, until the day you reach for something you've always taken for granted and the shelf is bare. Here's what's unsettling. It's already happening. Right now, across the country, 11 completely ordinary grocery store items are vanishing from shelves, not because of one big crisis, but because of a slow, largely invisible series of failures building beneath the surface, and most people have absolutely no idea. We're talking about things like black pepper, salt, cooking oil, matches, items so basic, so unremarkable that most of us have never once worried about finding them. That's exactly what makes this so dangerous. By the end of this video, you're going to know exactly which 11 items are slipping away, why it's happening, and most importantly, what you can do about it today, before the rest of the world catches on and the shelves go empty overnight. This isn't about fear. This isn't about worst-case scenarios. This is practical, grounded intelligence that most people simply don't have, and the kind of quiet preparation that could make all the difference for you and your family. Welcome to Essential Pantry, the channel dedicated to helping everyday people build smarter, more resilient kitchens. If that sounds like something you need in your life, hit subscribe and leave a like on this video. It genuinely helps us reach more people who need to hear this. Now, let's get into it. To understand why these 11 items are disappearing, you first need to understand how the nature of shortages has changed, because what's happening right now looks nothing like what most people remember from a few years ago. Cast your mind back to the early days of the pandemic. Empty shelves were everywhere. Toilet paper, cleaning supplies, flour, whole aisles stripped bare almost overnight. It was visible, it was dramatic, and it made headlines around the world. That kind of shortage is easy to see coming. People panic, stores empty out, and within a few weeks, supply chains scramble to catch up. What's happening today is far more subtle and, in many ways, far more dangerous. Instead of everything going missing at once, specific items are now vanishing quietly. A product that was fully stocked last Tuesday might be completely gone by Friday, with no explanation, no restock date, and no announcement. Grocery workers on the front lines are getting no clear answers from corporate. Supply chain professionals are watching restock windows evaporate for certain product lines. And yet, because it's not happening to everything simultaneously, most shoppers walk past these gaps and assume it's just a minor inventory hiccup. That's the trap. When shortages are sporadic and precise like this, they create a false sense of security. You see the item one week, so you assume it'll be there next week. You don't buy extra, you don't think twice, and then one day you really need it and it's gone. Not just at your store, everywhere. Because by the time a shortage like this surfaces in mainstream news, it's already too late. Panic buying sets in within hours. People clear shelves in a single morning, and the window to prepare quietly, without competition, without inflated prices, without stress, has closed. This is the cycle that's repeating itself right now with these 11 items, and it's being driven by a set of forces that most people are only dimly aware of. Think about what's happened to global agriculture over the last several years. Droughts in regions that supply critical spice crops, floods disrupting grain harvests, weather extremes that have become the norm rather than the exception. At the same time, manufacturing infrastructure for certain everyday goods hasn't been updated in decades. Some production lines are running on machinery from the 1970s. Replacement parts don't exist. When something breaks, the ripple effect is immediate, and you feel it at the grocery store. Then there's concentration. Many of the products we rely on most are produced in surprisingly few places. A single country, sometimes a single facility, supplying the majority of a global product. That's not resilience, that's fragility dressed up as efficiency. And when something disrupts that single point of production, the gap is felt everywhere, all at once. The combination of these pressures, climate instability, aging infrastructure, and dangerously concentrated supply chains, are creating a new kind of scarcity, one that doesn't announce itself loudly, one that sneaks up on you, and one that rewards the people who pay attention early and punishes those who wait for permission to act. The good news is you're watching this now. You have time to respond thoughtfully, methodically, without panic. But understanding the why is only the first step. Now let's talk about the what, the specific items that are quietly, steadily becoming harder to find, and why each one matters far more than most people realize. Let's start with something you probably have in a kitchen drawer right now and have never once thought to worry about: canning lids. Now, if you don't can your own food, you might be tempted to skip past this one. Don't, because canning lids are one of the most useful, most overlooked, and most quietly scarce items in the entire grocery supply chain, and their story reveals a lot about how fragile our everyday systems actually are. The canning lid industry operates almost entirely on manufacturing equipment that dates back to the 1970s. The parts needed to maintain that machinery are no longer in production. Companies are fabricating custom components to keep their lines running at all. That's not a stable foundation. That's a system held together with ingenuity and luck.
During peak canning season, which typically runs through late summer and fall, shelves were empty for 3 solid months last year. People were paying extraordinary prices online just to find basic lids. Farm supply stores that normally stock hundreds of boxes were down to a handful, or nothing at all. And here's why this matters even if you've never preserved a jar of food in your life. Canning lids can be used to reseal any standard mason jar for dry goods storage. They're reusable. They weigh almost nothing, take up almost no space, and in a barter scenario where people are trading goods instead of buying them, a box of canning lids has more practical value than you might imagine. They're cheap now. They may not be later. Moving on, let's talk about something that's probably sitting on your kitchen table right now: black pepper. This one has a global story behind it, and it starts in Vietnam. Vietnam produces roughly 35% of the world's black pepper supply. Right now, that country is experiencing its worst drought in 30 years. Yields are severely down. And here's the part that makes this particularly difficult to solve quickly. Pepper vines take several years to mature after planting. That means the weather happening today will shape the global pepper supply well into the future. There is no quick fix. But black pepper isn't just a spice. When refrigeration is unreliable or unavailable, black pepper functions as a genuine preservative for meats, extending shelf life by months in the right conditions. Whole peppercorns, stored in an airtight container, last virtually indefinitely. They pack enormous value per dollar spent. This is one of those items where buying in bulk today is simply a smart financial decision, independent of any shortage concern. Now let's talk about a liquid that most people walk right past without a second thought: white vinegar. Plain, ordinary white vinegar. It doesn't look impressive, it doesn't cost much, and it is one of the most genuinely multi-purpose substances you can store in a home. Its production relies heavily on corn, which is increasingly under pressure, both from unpredictable weather patterns and from competition with the ethanol fuel industry. That pressure translates directly to the shelf. Vinegar sections have gone from fully stocked to completely bare in a matter of days in several states, with no warning. Consider what white vinegar actually does. It pickles vegetables without refrigeration, preserving them for months. It cleans and disinfects surfaces more effectively than most people realize. It eliminates laundry odors. It can improve the safety of questionable water through acidification, a surprisingly important property during water quality advisories. It never expires, ever. A gallon of white vinegar bought today will be just as useful 10 years from now. The value-to-cost ratio here is almost unmatched by anything else on this list. Now let's move to something that practically defined comfort food during every economic hardship of the last 100 years: baking soda. The story from Argentina's financial collapse in 2001 is worth knowing. When the economy failed and supply chains fractured, baking soda became a high-value trade good, not just because of one thing it could do, but because of everything it could do. Neutralize stomach acid, treat insect bites and stings, clean teeth and prevent dental problems from becoming emergencies, deodorize living spaces, extinguish grease fires where water would only make things worse, leaven bread when yeast is nowhere to be found. On the supply side, baking soda comes from a mineral called trona, mined primarily in Wyoming. Those mines aren't expanding. Demand has been climbing. Production is essentially flat. Prices have already moved higher as a result. This is a situation that doesn't resolve itself, it gets worse over time, and the solution is simple. Buy it in bulk, store it in an airtight container, and know that almost every dollar you spend on it will pay itself back. Now let's talk about the oldest form of currency ever used by human civilization: salt. The word salary comes from the Latin word for salt. Roman soldiers were literally paid in it. That might sound like ancient history, but the reasons salt was so extraordinarily valued are the same reasons it matters today. It is physiologically essential. The human body cannot function without sodium. It preserves meat and vegetables for months without any refrigeration. It replaces electrolytes lost to heat and physical labor, preventing exhaustion and illness during demanding conditions. Most people store salt in a shaker. That is not enough. For true food security, think in pounds, not ounces. Stored correctly in a cool, dry place, sealed from moisture, salt literally never expires. And at the price it commands at the grocery store, it is among the most economical preparedness investments you can make. The gap between what most households have and what would actually be useful in a prolonged disruption is enormous. Close that gap now while it's cheap and easy. Now let's talk about something that disappeared completely during the pandemic and revealed just how concentrated and fragile its supply chain actually is: yeast. For roughly 6 months in 2020, active dry yeast was simply gone. Not scarce, gone. And that happened because of a single demand variable. People started baking bread at home. That's it. One behavioral shift across one country, and a product evaporated from shelves for half a year. Now imagine what happens to that supply in a scenario that's more serious than everyone baking sourdough out of boredom. Yeast production is concentrated in a small number of facilities. Any problem at any of those facilities creates an immediate nation.
The solution that sidesteps this vulnerability entirely is sourdough starter, a live culture of wild yeast that you maintain yourself, that costs you almost nothing to keep alive, and that gives you an indefinite, self-replenishing supply of leavening. Learning to maintain a sourdough culture is genuinely one of the most practical skills you can add to your kitchen repertoire. In the meantime, commercial yeast keeps well for years when stored in the freezer, still sealed in its original packaging. Now let's cover something that goes into nearly every meal cooked in every kitchen in the country: cooking oil. Vegetable oil, canola oil, soybean oil. These are among the most supply chain vulnerable items in your pantry. They're derived from crops that are highly susceptible to weather events. They require complex industrial refining processes, and once opened, they have a relatively short shelf life before they begin to degrade. Any disruption at the crop level or the refinery level sends ripples straight to grocery store shelves. The strategy here involves two things: how you buy and how you store. Buy in smaller bottles rather than large containers, because opening a smaller bottle means less exposure to air before you use it up. Store unopened bottles somewhere cool and away from direct light. Some people extend shelf life further by adding the contents of a vitamin E capsule to opened oil. It acts as an antioxidant and slows rancidity. Most importantly, rotate your stock regularly. Oil is calorie-dense in a way that few other pantry items are. It is fuel in the most literal sense, and its absence from a kitchen changes the nature of every single meal. Now let's talk about something so simple and so ancient that it's almost funny to include on this list, until you think about what life looks like without it: matches. Matches are made in centralized, aging production facilities. Some of those facilities have had to close entire sections due to irreparable equipment breakdowns, cutting supply significantly almost overnight. The chemical ingredients involved, red phosphorus, sulfur compounds, are subject to tightening regulations that may further restrict production capacity in coming years. A lighter seems like a reasonable substitute until it doesn't work. Lighters were not a fuel. They fail in cold temperatures. The mechanisms break. Waterproof or strike-anywhere matches require no fuel, no mechanism, and no maintenance. They work in conditions where nothing else will. They're compact, inexpensive, and will store indefinitely when kept dry. In any scenario where the power grid is unreliable, whether for a day or a month, the ability to reliably start a fire is not a luxury. It is fundamental. Let's move to the item that has saved more lives in disaster scenarios than perhaps anything else on this list: bleach.
Not scented bleach, not multi-surface formulas, plain unscented chlorine bleach. 8 drops per gallon of water renders it safe to drink. That single fact has made bleach a primary survival tool in every major disaster of the last century. Beyond water purification, it kills pathogens on surfaces, disinfects tools and medical equipment, and in past disaster scenarios has been one of the most sought-after barter commodities available. There is one critical thing to understand about bleach that most people get wrong. It degrades. After 6 to 12 months, bleach begins to lose its potency. Buying 20 gallons and storing them for years means you're likely storing water by the time you need the bleach. The correct approach is rotation, keeping roughly 6 gallons on hand at any given time, cycling through it within that 6 to 12-month window, always storing in the original container, cool and away from sunlight. Now batteries, seemingly mundane, genuinely critical. The raw materials required to produce batteries are concentrated in a small number of countries, and the combination of rising global demand and supply chain pressures is driving both price increases and intermittent availability issues. For emergency preparedness purposes, classic alkaline AA and A3A batteries are actually preferable to rechargeable ones, because rechargeable batteries slowly drain themselves in storage. Alkalines hold their charge for up to 10 years when stored properly. That means they're useful the moment you need them, without any warning, without any charging time. The most practical approach to building a battery supply is gradual, 1 pack per grocery run. That's it. Over a few months, you'll have a meaningful reserve without ever spending a significant sum at once. Store them cool and dry, away from heat, and check periodically for any sign of leakage or corrosion. And finally, don't underestimate this last one just because it sounds trivial. Instant coffee. In a genuine crisis, sustained power outages, prolonged disruptions, situations where daily life looks different from normal, morale is not a soft concern, it is a practical one. Fatigue, stress, and low morale affect decision-making, physical performance, and mental health in ways that compound over time. Caffeine addresses part of that, comfort addresses the rest. Instant coffee, when stored sealed in a glass jar, maintains quality for 20 years or more. It requires no special equipment, just hot water, and its barter value in difficult conditions has historical precedent. During the siege of Sarajevo in the 1990s, coffee was reportedly worth more than cigarettes as a trade item. People will trade meaningful things for a small luxury when everything else is stripped away. Beyond drinking, instant coffee can deepen the flavor of stews, chili, and braised meats. Supply can be extended by blending with chicory or roasted dandelion root. And in terms of the psychological boost it delivers relative to what it costs, there are very few better investments per dollar in your entire pantry.
Now you know the 11 items. You understand why they're disappearing and why each one carries more value than its ordinary appearance suggests. So what do you actually do with this information? The first and most important thing to understand is this. The goal is never to panic. Panic buying is not preparation, it's the thing that causes the very shortages we're trying to protect against. When enough people rush to stores all at once, shelves empty within hours and prices spike. That's not a strategy. That's the problem wearing a different hat. The strategy is patience and consistency. Pick 2 or 3 items from this list on your next grocery run. Add a little extra of each, then do the same thing the following week, then the week after that. Over the course of a month or two, built into your normal shopping routine, you'll accumulate a meaningful reserve of every single item on this list without spending a large sum at once, without drawing attention, and without contributing to the very scarcity you're preparing for. Slow, steady, and quiet is the approach that actually works. As you're building your supply, think about prioritization. Start with the items that see the most use in your household on a daily basis. If you cook from scratch every night, oil, salt, and yeast move to the top of your list. If you live somewhere where power outages are common, matches and batteries become immediately urgent. The universal high-value items, the ones worth prioritizing regardless of your specific situation, are salt, white vinegar, and bleach. Between them, they cover nutrition, preservation, sanitation, and water safety. Those 3 alone represent an enormous improvement in household resilience.
Once you've bought something, storing it correctly is what determines whether your investment actually pays off, and this is where most people make quiet, costly mistakes. Powders like baking soda and salt should go into airtight containers. Moisture is their enemy. A sealed container keeps them stable indefinitely. Chemical liquids, bleach and vinegar, should stay in their original containers. Don't transfer them. The original jugs are designed for those specific substances. Spices like black pepper and whole peppercorns do best in airtight glass containers, away from heat and light. Yeast should go in the freezer while still in its original sealed packaging. Cooking oil should be kept somewhere genuinely cool, not just room temperature in a warm kitchen and away from sunlight, which accelerates rancidity. For the items that degrade over time, a rotation schedule is non-negotiable. Bleach goes off in 6 to 12 months. Mark the date you bought it and replace it on schedule. Opened cooking oil degrades faster than most people realize. Use what you open within a reasonable time frame and replace it. Batteries should be checked annually for any sign of leakage. Everything else on this list, stored properly, will last for years or decades without any intervention at all. But here's something that doesn't get said enough in conversations about preparedness. Supplies without skills are only half the picture. A gallon of white vinegar is useful if you know how to use it for pickling. It is significantly less useful if you've never actually pickled anything and wouldn't know where to start. A stock of salt means far more if you understand how to use it to cure meat, how much to use, for how long, under what conditions. Bleach is a powerful water purification tool if you know the ratio. If you don't, it's just a cleaning product. The skills that pair most directly with the items on this list are genuinely learnable in an afternoon. Vegetable pickling with vinegar is one of the simplest forms of food preservation and produces delicious results on the first attempt. Maintaining a sourdough culture is a weekly 10-minute commitment that gives you a permanent, self-renewing source of leavening. Meat curing with salt and black pepper is ancient, well-documented, and requires no special equipment. Safe water purification with bleach requires knowing a single number, 8 drops per gallon. None of these are advanced skills. They're not survivalist techniques reserved for extreme circumstances. They're practical knowledge that used to be completely ordinary, that every household had access to a few generations ago, and that has quietly faded from common awareness. Relearning them doesn't require a dramatic lifestyle shift. It just requires a little curiosity and a free afternoon. The deeper point here is this: resilience is not about fear. It is not about imagining catastrophe. It is about closing the gap between where you are and where you'd like to be if things get difficult, and doing it calmly, methodically, and without drama. Every item on this list is cheap right now. Every skill associated with them is free to learn. Every step you take toward quiet preparation is a step away from dependency on a supply chain that, as we've seen, is more fragile than it appears. The people who struggle most in moments of disruption are not the ones who prepared too much. They're the ones who assumed it would never happen to them, and then found themselves scrambling when it did. You don't have to be one of those people. Start this week. Pick 2 or 3 items, add them to your cart, come home and store them correctly. Then do it again next week. That's the whole strategy. That's genuinely all it takes to get ahead of this, and to know that whatever happens to those grocery store shelves in the coming months, your household is covered. That's all for today on Essential Pantry. If this video gave you something useful, something you didn't know before, or a perspective that shifted how you think about your pantry, let us know in the comments. Tell us which item on this list surprised you most. And if you haven't already, subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next.